West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The January 6th Select Committee has put out a brand new video. It shows Trump's acting defense secretary denying there were orders to have troops ready to protect the Capitol.
Just want to be clear here that since then, in February of 2021, Mark Meadows said on Fox News that, quote, even in January, that was a given. As many as 10,000 National Guard troops were told to be on the ready by the Secretary of Defense. Is there any accuracy to that statement?
I'm not from my perspective. I was never given any direction or order or knew of any plans of that nature.
Never given any direction or order. Now, that's testimony given under oath. Well, as opposed to this moment.
I definitely gave the number of 10,000 National Guardsmen. I think you should have 10,000 of the National Guard ready. They took that number, from what I understand, they gave it to the people at the Capitol, which is controlled by Pelosi, and I heard they rejected it because they didn't think it looked good.
Gave that number to the people at the Capitol. I'm going to need some more specifics there. Olivia and Miles are still with us. We're joined also by Alex Burns. He's national political correspondent with the New York Times. I'm glad to have you all here. First of all, we were told no more hearings until September. You've all marked off your calendars. You're waiting with bated breath. You cannot wait for the next one, I understand. But we thought maybe it'd be kind of radio silence till then. This obviously tells you for every statement that might come out, I'm just going to leave this right here for you at the table. What do you make of this decision to do that? Was it trying to undercut the prospective notion that Trump could have a leg to stand on in the public eye? What's this about?
Look, I think the committee has been very, very deliberate all the way through about putting out information at a time and in a manner of their choosing to just dominate the news cycle. And yeah, I think to deny Donald Trump a clear lane to make his own case at any point ever, right? This is not necessarily the thinking of the committee, but I think it sure works out pretty well for them politically that just as Donald Trump is coming back into the public eye with a series of big speeches about the future of the America First agenda, there's another drop of evidence just like that. And I think that Donald Trump should assume that that's going to continue happening.
It's scary, right? You don't necessarily know what's out there. So if you're him, perhaps, or others, by the way, I'm not just focusing on him, there are others that they might have little tidbits, little breadcrumbs that are going to be spread out among whatever trail they want to have. But politically speaking, I'm always wondering this. If the end game is accountability, the big umbrella of accountability, I so often have people say, if you prosecute a former president, it's going to really divide the nation. Let's just move on and beyond even knowing the truth. And I wonder, do you really think that prosecuting or holding accountable in some way, shape, or form somebody who might be engaged in this behavior, is that going to divide our nation irrevocably, or is the absence of doing that the problem?
I'm going to say two things on that, and I hope that Alex and Olivia come in and hit me at both sides. But I think it would be both cathartic for this country and potentially violent. On the catharsis piece, look, Americans want to know that no one is above the law. And the committee, I think, has already shown that laws were broken here. They've made a damn good case, and they're not even the prosecutors in this. They're not the Justice Department. They're a congressional committee that doesn't have the ability to do this prosecution. But I think they've made a really compelling case here that laws were broken, especially that key law, right? Disrupting a proceeding of Congress. So it's cathartic to the American people to know that no one, even a president, is above the law. So that's important. But at the same time, I highlight violence very warily, because whether a Trump, if he is prosecuted and convicted, or a Trump, if he's prosecuted and exonerated, people in the law enforcement community have told me, and I'm sure Olivia, that those situations could both end violently. Is that Trump supporters, if convicted, could be out there in the streets conducting acts of violence. And if he's exonerated, I think you could see riots in this country. So it's definitely a dangerous situation, but not a reason to not go forward with the law.
Is that what you're hearing too?
Yeah, I think, to Miles' point, I've had these conversations in national security circles where there is concern that would a prosecution or holding them accountable in that way, would it lead to violence? Would it lead to more the civil war direction that we're heading in, that everyone's concerned about in the country? My argument on that is, like, aren't we already on the brink of that? We're already kind of there. And, you know, if you decide that we're going to be a nation that is not going to uphold the rule of law, also, what are we saying internationally to the world, right? What are we saying on the world stage to foreign adversaries and to international partners? That the rule of law no longer matters, that, you know, that wealth and power actually can undermine the rule of law? Is that the precedent we want to set based on the fact that we fear violence? I mean, we already have violence right now. We're already experiencing that. There's already great concern about political violence regardless in upcoming elections in the future because of how divided we are. And also a lot of it because of Donald Trump's rhetoric and the emboldening that he's done with these extremist groups.
It is, to me, just such a bizarre American perspective that you can't prosecute somebody who used to run your government or the country will fall apart. Happens in other places in the world all the time. They've indicted former presidents and prime ministers in countries like France and Israel and Korea and Brazil. Those countries are still around. I'm not saying it's easy for them, and I'm not saying it'd be easy here, but it is this sort of, I think, legacy of Watergate and the pardon of Richard Nixon, this idea that the only way you turn the page is to not hold the person in charge accountable. I think it's a really strange kind of American exceptionalism.
Well, speaking of turning the page, Vice President Mike Pence was speaking today, and he wanted to sort of turn the page. He had an interesting statement about how he and Trump are not so different on the policy front, just on the focus. Here he is.
I don't know that the president and I differ on issues, but we may differ on focus. I truly do believe that elections are about the future, and that it's absolutely essential at a time when so many Americans are hurting, so many families are struggling, that we don't give way to the temptation to look back.
What a very nice way of saying, please stop talking about what happened in the past. I mean, that's what he's going at, right? Without saying as many words, but am I just giving him too much credit? Alex is like, no.
They do disagree on the hanging Mike Pence issue, right? I think that's a place where they do not have the same agenda.
They are not in agreement that should happen. You are correct. That's right.
But seriously, look, I think one of the challenges here, one of the many challenges here for Mike Pence, yes, it's the question of how do you parse your relationship with Donald Trump and your role in the Trump administration. But it's also that if Mike Pence is saying you don't talk about the past, you talk about the future, Mike Pence's past as the vice president is the only reason why he's seen as a serious candidate for president in 2024. He's not an ideological visionary for the party. He's not seen as one of the big ideas people, one of the electrifying, charismatic,
just
new guard leaders of the Republican Party. Association with Trump, his role in Congress, and basically a stalwart member of the party in good standing for a very long time, culminating in his service as vice president. If you can't tell a story about that phase of your career and then spinning it forward with a set of new ideas, I think it's awfully hard to compete. I think a lot of people I talk to in Republican politics think it's awfully hard for him to compete with the Ron DeSantises of the world, who really do represent a next generation and don't need to untangle, what they were doing in the Oval Office at any given date and time.
Look at this new poll, though. Look at this new poll. I want you guys to see. I want you to comment on this. There's a new poll CNN has with SSRS from back in July, end of July, a couple days ago, actually, where you got Republican-leaning voters, whether they want the nominee to be Trump or somebody else. And they say Donald Trump, 44%, And then a different candidate, 55%. So, I mean, not a total runaway, but that's pretty significant.
These numbers were flipped a year ago. In fact, they were worse than that. It was something like 75% wanted to see Donald Trump. So that's very significant. A lot of damage has been done to Trump here politically throughout all of this. More and more people want to see a new face. But I also would caution, you cannot overstate the stranglehold that Trump's MAGA movement has on the levers that determine who the nominee is. All the way down to the precinct captain level, the MAGA team has been exceptional at infiltrating the Republican Party and taking it over. That does give Donald Trump a built-in advantage, and I don't think you can underestimate him. As far as whether Pence could be competitive, I mean, look, Alex made great points, but if you want to know what the Mike Pence vice presidency was like, Mike Pence is a guy with an erect posture and a flaccid conscience, okay? He stood up tall, but he did not stand up to Donald Trump, okay? And we just saw it in that clip. He stood up tall in the speech, but he still, after people trying to assassinate him, could not stand up to Donald Trump and said, we don't disagree on the issues.
It is Wednesday, the 27th of July of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one separate us from these meddlesome priests? Will no one? Wow. Okay, well, the Turning Point USA confab is still being reported on, and it looks like they are trying to sue. They put a cease and desist order on The View with I think that's a precursor to an actual lawsuit, because according to these young stormtroopers, they were wrongly aligned with the Nazis that showed up at their doorstep during the confab, in which they made no real effort to get rid of them. Now, there's purports to be some effort, actually, by the Turning Point people to persuade the Nazis not to be so visible. We told you not to do this like so visible. You know, right now. I mean, can you wait till we get started? But they didn't call the cops or anything like that. So, you know, what are you going to do? But anyway, they're going to sue The View because they reported about, hey, Nazis outside, Nazis inside. And this is the same group that is begging Viktor Orban to come speak to their confab too. I think Orban might have a little bit of a problem with Berbert, though. I think she's a little too much of a hottie for his lockdown idea of what government is. Yeah, trust me. So, yeah, speaking of Berbert, she's up there. Now think of this. This is essentially a confab with a bunch of high school kids and young college kids. It's like, I don't know, is this one of those Mormon things before they go on their retreat or whatever it is, travel around the world to convert people to Mormonism? They have like a little bit of time to go blow off a little steam, so to speak. So I've often wondered if that's really what Turning Point USA is, and it really is. It's sort of like a spring break thing for, I don't know, stormtrooper, goose-stepping Nazi-Jungen. So, of course, they're the ones that are going to whine and sue The View, because that rhymes with Jew, you know. And, you know, Whoopi Goldberg, she's not only black, she's a Jew. So they're going to sue The View for defaming them. And I was thinking, okay, let's go with it then, because I want to see the discovery on this. I really, really do. Do you want to open it up, kids? Come on. We're ready for you. Yeah, we'll show you The View. Anyway, there's that going on. And then also we had the wildfire risk assessment maps mailed to us. We got a letter here in Oregon. And, of course, that's made a lot of people upset because, you know, we've been telling them, you know, look, man, if we keep this up, things are going to just spontaneously combust and no one's going to like it. And now it's spontaneously combusting and they're whining like it's some sort of plot to control people. All these fires are just normal. Why do I have to fortify my house? And I want what I want. I don't care about anything else. And people are whining that these wildfire assessment maps are not tethered in reality. And yet, just in the last couple of years, we've had whole towns of thousands of people who lost their homes because of wildfires going through in just a few minutes. Zoom. It's like they forget or they don't care. Didn't happen to me, so it's not going to happen to me. Yeah, and then when it does, you're whining like, why won't anyone take care of me? Jesus. We're trying to mitigate the problem before, the thing, hurts you. So, in the midst of this, we in Josephine County. Now, I'm just on the border of Josephine and Jackson, so, I keep track of what's going on in Josephine County, too. That's where Grants Pass is. So, there was a meeting, actually, for Jackson and Josephine counties in Grants Pass where the state was going to explain, give a seminar, a symposium, a presentation to explain what these maps mean. And to answer people's questions in a public forum like you do in a representative democracy. There'd be public comment. They would do their presentation. They'd field questions and answer the questions. But of course, this being Southern Oregon, with the legacy of the sundown town, which I'm assured doesn't exist anymore. Give me a break. There's some ad hoc ones around here, and we all know it. Anyway, what's called the offshoot of the former local oath keeper militia. They call them a militia now. Okay, I guess it's supposed to give them the imprimatur of some sort of legitimacy. Anyway, the offshoot of the local oath keepers terrorized the participants, the presenters, and the cops said, we better not have this meeting. And of course, now they're all whining that the state won't meet with them publicly. They were going to come armed, and they threatened in a way that it became unsafe for everybody involved. If it was just the state nerds coming to explain the maps, it would have been one thing. But it was... And I know who's going to be blamed. Not the Oath Keepers. It'll be Antifa. That's how it always is. And it's also Antifa pushing these maps down our throats. Well, you know what? It turns out that really what the state has done is that they've gone over actuary maps, insurance company recommendations who have made their assessments, and they basically just followed that. So whine to your insurance companies, and I got to tell you, when an actuary says it's true, it's true. These are modern times. Grow up. We got to keep these insurance companies from telling us we're going to have rising sea levels. No, no, no. And then they get their houses flooded out from giant tides, and they go, no one warned me. Why am I just now finding this out? Is that human nature? Might be. All right. Well, let us go to what we have curated for you today. A rundown, at least, at the top here. And, yes, we shall do that. Of course, at the top, the former acting defense secretary, Chris Miller, contradicted Trump under oath. Yeah. How many acting defense secretaries did that guy have? Makes you wonder. On the rest of the menu, the DHS Inspector General should be removed from the Secret Service probe. And he better be. Should be. He better be. The Arizona fake-electors subpoenas show the breadth of the DOJ J6 investigations. Yeah, I told you. Give Mueller some time. And a Washington state GOP candidate's links to violent right-wing extremism surfaced in the U.S. congressional primary. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Boris Johnson defended meeting without staff an ex-KGB agent at a party after returning from a NATO meeting in 2018. Wow, that was going around, huh? Some sort of infection? And the leaders of Japan and Indonesia agreed to bolster their ties in maritime security, as well as their cooperation on climate change, energy, and investment. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is our chat room link. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending Netroots Nation in Pittsburgh this year. So we look forward to some great content by Kelly coming out of Netroots Nation this year. It's in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Please look now across the page to the left from that chat room link, and you will notice our Patreon link. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and I don't know, how about if you could send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month? We are able to pool those dollars, stretch them beyond compare, pay our bills, and fly under the radar. Therefore, continuing this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against representative democracy, not only in the United States of America, but around the world. And we thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. All kidding aside, thank you for your generosity. We need some help paying our bills, so if there's some out there who can afford it in these perilous times, thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Now, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. In fact, it's not even about. It is 10 minutes before showtime, because I put it in queue, set the time, and there it goes. But then I have to scramble and physically manipulate getting that linked up on Twitter. But you can find the generic show notes and links page that I have there at Daily Codes, and you can find that at Justice Putnam on Twitter. Okay, so there you go. The show notes and links are very important because that's where the full reportage is. All right, and the real reportage too. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Really, wherever podcasts can be found. And, of course, until they burn down the Digital Library of Alexandria, you can find the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library from the last 11 years. Yeah, 24/7, 365, that's what we do here. All that time. Well, we had a lot of shows through that time, didn't we? And you can find them at the Internet Archive at archive.org. This first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Washington Post by Carol Leonnig, yes, that Carol Leonnig, and Maria Sacchetti. A pair of congressional Democrats called on Department of Homeland Security Inspector General Joseph Cuffari to step aside from his office's investigation into the Secret Service, saying the Trump appointee knew earlier than has been reported that the agency deleted text messages from around the time of the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Reps Carolyn Maloney, who has the House committee that oversees inspectors general, and Benny G. Thompson, chairman of the January 6 committee and the Homeland Security Committee, said the inspectors general's office admitted in congressional briefings that it became aware that agents' text messages were erased in December of 2021, 2 months earlier than reported. But Cuffari did not report that to Congress until this month. The lawmakers said these and other omissions have broken their faith in Cuffari's ability to lead the investigation, and they urged the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, an independent entity in the executive branch, to appoint another inspector general to handle a Secret Service probe. Due to the nature and the importance of this investigation, there must be no doubt that the inspector general leading this investigation can conduct it thoroughly and with integrity, objectivity, and independence. The lawmakers wrote in the letter, "We do not have confidence that Inspector General Cuffari can achieve those standards." Devlin Barnett and Yvonne Wingett Sanchez, also of the Washington Post, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Grand jury subpoenas issued last month to 2 Arizona state lawmakers show the breadth of the criminal investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington into efforts by supporters of Trump to use false electors to try to undo Biden's 2020 election victory. Copies of 2 subpoenas issued to Republican state senators from Arizona were released on Monday via a public records request, confirming what has been previously reported about the June demands for records related to the signing or mailing of any document purporting to be a certificate certifying elector votes in favor of Donald J. Trump and or Michael R. Pence. The subpoenas issued to Karen Fahn, president of the Arizona Senate, and Senator Kelly Townsend also seek communications, quote, relating to any effort, plan, or attempt to serve as an elector, end quote, in favor of the then president and then vice president. A subpoena is not an accusation, but rather a demand for information that investigators believe may help them solve a crime. The documents released on Monday cast a wide net for any communications that Fahn and Townsend may have had with any member of the executive or legislative branch of the federal government, any representative or agent of Trump or his campaign, or Trump boosters Jenna Ellis, Bernard Kerik, Rudy Giuliani, Boris Epshteyn, James Trupis, Joe DeGenova, John Eastman, Joshua Findley, Justin Clark, Kenneth Cheeseborough, Mike Roman, or Victoria Toensing. Brian Slodisco of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A congressional candidate whose compelling personal story of military valor and unfathomable loss helped him win former President Donald Trump's support, has connections to right-wing extremists, including a campaign consultant who was a member of the Proud Boys. Republican Joe Kent, who is challenging U.S. Representative Jamie Herrera Butler of Washington State in the August 2nd primary, has also courted prominent white nationalists and posed recently for a photograph with a media personality who has previously described Adolf Hitler as a complicated historical figure who many people misunderstand. Does he click his heels when he says that? I can hear it right now. An Associated Press review of internet postings, court records, and campaign finance disclosures depict a candidate with a far more complicated biography than the compelling personal story that turned the 42-year-old Kent into a favorite of conservative media. Square-jawed, with wavy black hair and sleeve tattoos, the former Green Beret served 11 combat deployments before retiring from Special Forces to join the CIA. He also endured unspeakable tragedy. His wife Shannon, a Navy cryptologist, was killed by a suicide bomber in 2019 while fighting the Islamic State group in Syria, leaving him to raise their 2 young sons alone. But, taken broadly, Kent's recent relationships and activities reinforce concerns about the GOP's ties to extremist groups. The House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol has drawn attention to the role such organizations, particularly the Proud Boys, played in an effort to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power after Trump's re-election loss in 2020. There's a through line, said Dave Newart, an author and journalist who has covered right-wing extremism in the Pacific Northwest for decades. Many Republican politicians play footsie with it. Kent is just unabashed. Kent's campaign declined to make him available for an interview. And that means that we're ready for our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take 2 Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, do crawdads sing? Whenever I check a certain review aggregator and see that 95% of an audience likes a movie, yet only 30% of reviewers, my curiosity is aroused. The movie adaptation of Delia Owens' 2018 novel Where the Crawdad Sings is such a movie, which poses questions about what ordinary moviegoers want compared with reviewers. The novel provides the bones of a decent movie. A young woman, Kaya, ends up mostly bringing herself up in the swamps of North Carolina after her family flees her abusive alcoholic father before the father abandons Kaya. The story is told in retrospect during a murder trial in which Kaya is the defendant after one of the 2 men with whom she's become involved turns up dead at the base of a fire tower. The problems start but don't end with the production design. It's way too clean and ridiculously obviously not filmed in North Carolina. Picture To Kill a Mockingbird, where everyone's dressed out of the J. Crew catalog, never perspires, or has a southern accent. And in the area of race relations, anyone who grew up in or near North Carolina during this era, the 60s, would be wondering if this one was filmed on Earth, given the interactions portrayed between the African-American and white characters. Daisy Edgar Jones gives a good performance as young adult Kaya, and David Strathairn kills it as her attorney, despite both working from an unremarkable script. The cinematography gives Where the Crawdads Sing a nice look. I suspect the mostly female readers of the novel taking this one in are probably happy with it, especially with the hunky male leads. As to singing crawdads, that's addressed in dialogue, but it represents a level of subtle metaphor not found anywhere else in this one. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
And welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we'll look at how new Omicron subvariants are already increasing cases and hospitalizations.
And we'll try and figure out if fall vaccine boosters should contain standard Omicron or some of those new subvariants instead. It's the height of summer here, and we were kind of hoping for a break, but we're already seeing another COVID surge. This time, it's driven by Omicron subvariants BA5 and BA4. What do we know about them so far?
Yeah, Josh. Well, unfortunately, the lull after the last surge didn't last very long. BA4 and BA5 are offshoots of the Omicron variant, a version of which caused a massive wave earlier this year. BA5, and to a lesser extent BA4, now make up more than 70% of COVID infections in the US. And they are the most capable of evading our immune response from vaccination or infection of any variant so far.
Now you have me worried. Do we know if these subvariants are causing more severe disease?
Well, we do know that we're seeing upticks in hospitalizations in countries around the world, including here in the US. The variants appeared to cause more severe disease in hamsters, but there's not yet clear evidence of this in people. But the more people who get infected, the more people who will end up in the hospital. It's just numbers.
Right. Even if the portion of severe disease stays the same, the absolute number will climb along with these infections. Now, the subvariants are already dominant in some countries. Can we learn anything from those places about what might happen here?
Well, it's hard to make direct comparisons because each country has its own patchwork of immunity to the virus. But we can see a clear pattern elsewhere. BA4 and BA5 were first seen in South Africa, and then in Portugal, where they caused a spike in hospitalizations, despite the country's high vaccination rate. This is now happening in many other countries.
And previous infections don't appear to protect against these variants as well, do they?
That's right. People who had the original Omicron variant, BA1, seem to have a higher rate of reinfection with these newer Omicron subvariants compared to those infected with previous variants. That's troubling because it seems like hybrid immunity from vaccination plus infection no longer seems to last that long.
So are we just going to keep getting COVID over and over and over again?
Well, possibly, unless vaccine makers can develop new booster shots that target Omicron subvariants. That could improve our protection. It seems likely the US could face another fall or winter COVID wave. But we could have better booster shots to ward it off. Josh, what are the chances of that?
It does look like better boosters are coming, Tanya. The question is whether they'll get here in time to stop that fall wave that you mentioned. And the timing seems to depend on what vaccine makers put in the shots.
So what are the choices?
Well, both Moderna and Pfizer began developing shots with the ancestral Omicron variant months ago, and Moderna has already said those could be ready by August. But the FDA and its Vaccine Advisory Committee just said that the new boosters should be built around the new subvariants, BA4 and BA5. And the vaccine makers say that those shots, which they're just starting to test, wouldn't be ready until October.
But that will be too late to fend off a fall wave. Why pick the slower route?
Because it looks like boosters using BA4 and 5 will protect people better, since those subvariants are the ones dominating new infections right now. So they'll either be the ones circulating in the fall, or those fall viruses will be very similar. The FDA wanted boosters that are more likely to produce antibodies that neutralize the subvariants. And lab tests indicate that vaccines built around ancestral Omicron don't do that well enough. The subvariants are just different enough from their ancestor to evade an Omicron-prompted immune response. The idea behind the boosters is to trigger broader-based immunity. So the shots contain genetic material from the original SARS-CoV-2 virus, the one that hit us in early 2020, as a foundation. And then they add in material from the new subvariants. It's basically teaching your immune system to respond to a wider spectrum of virus versions.
So this is kind of a race against time, and virologists are hoping the boosters are so effective they can stop or slow down a new wave.
Yes, it's a race. I think the FDA was convinced by data showing that people infected by ancestral Omicron were getting reinfected by the subvariants. So they were afraid that the same kind of thing would happen if they rolled out old Omicron-based boosters. Health officials were also worried that people wouldn't get such boosters. That's already a problem. 3/4 of people eligible for boosters have not gotten them, and there seems to be a perception that the shots, based on the 2020 virus, are outdated. Peter Marks, who runs the FDA's vaccine office, says he hopes effective boosters against the latest subvariants will convince a lot more people that the shots are up to date, and they should roll up their sleeves.
What happens, though, if the fall virus is some new, really different version? New versions seem to keep turning up every couple of months.
It is a bit of a gamble, but Trevor Bedford, an evolutionary biologist at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, thinks it's a good bet the fall virus will be pretty similar. He tracks the way the virus mutates and says all the recent changes keep new versions within the Omicron branch of the virus family tree. Since those versions have been wildly successful at spreading, he expects that trend to continue. And this summer, vaccine makers and the FDA will be testing those new boosters to make sure they are just as successful at keeping up.
Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us. Our show is edited by Jeff Delvicio and Tulika Bose.
We're going to take a short summer break for the next 2 weeks.
Even in a pandemic, you need some time off.
Especially in a pandemic.
But we'll be back the first week of August with a new episode of COVID Quickly.
And check out Siam.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Last July, several GOP senators combined their 5-watt intellects to charge that inflation was rising because of, quote, insane tax and spending spree of President Biden and the Democrats. Never mind that the insane spending is for such sensible, productive, and enormously popular national needs as child care and jobless benefits. Mitch McConnell's rabidly partisan flock saw the chance to politicize the public's legitimate worries about rising prices. You poor consumers are made to pay more for basics, they squawked, because of Socialist Joe's investment in grassroots people. Follow the ricocheting pinball of the GOP's logic. 1, they say that helping hard-hit families induces them to refuse to go to work. 2, this creates blockages in the global supply chain. 3, this causes shortages of everything. 4, this forces corporate bosses to raise all prices, which 5, slams the middle class and poor, so 6, lazy workers cause inflation. Whoa! Rube Goldberg couldn't have dreamed up a more fantastical diagram to deflect attention from what's really happening, namely that instead of an inflation problem, we have a corporate greed problem. Of course, the greedmeisters insist that their pursuit of excess corporate profits has not driven any price surges. In our economy of free market competition, they snap, prices are established by the law of supply and demand. It's the magic of the marketplace, they explain. But magicians don't do magic, they perform illusions. And the illusion of free market competition implodes when it hits the reality that our economy doesn't remotely resemble a competitive marketplace. This is Jim Hightower saying, for some 40 years, corporate-directed government policies have been transforming America into a monopoly nation, letting the few gouge the many. That's where inflation comes from.
Is the United States moving towards a state-sponsored religion? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Until recently, that question would be considered utterly preposterous, ridiculous, inane, impossible, because the First Amendment prohibits the government from making any law regarding the establishment of religion. The Establishment Clause prevents the government, federal, state, and local, from favoring, promoting, assisting, or endorsing religion, or any specific religion. Or so you thought. Last term, the Supreme Court decided on the basis of free speech and free exercise of religion arguments that a high school coach could conduct a prayer service on the 50-yard line after the games, no matter the compulsion to participate felt by student players who didn't share the coach's religious beliefs. In addition, the Supreme Court also ruled last term that the state of Maine can't exclude religious schools from a program that offers government tuition payments to private schools for students who live in a town without a public school. In other words, the court ruled states can be forced to pay for and subsidize religious education. In the past, the Supreme Court's Establishment Clause cases have protected and defended religious minorities. These new decisions are different because they, as a practical matter, allow and encourage the government to bolster and promote the dominant religion, even when doing so comes at the expense of people who do not share those beliefs. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. That was the day labor leader William Silvis died. Silvis was born in Armball, Pennsylvania. He learned the trade of wagon making from his father, but soon he left home to take up an apprenticeship as an iron worker. He found work in Philadelphia. At the time, there was an increasing practice of iron molders to hire unskilled workers as helpers for the skilled craftsmen. This led to skilled workers seeing their wages cut. Silvis joined a strike against the wage erosion led by the Journeyman Stove and Hollowware Molders Union. Soon, he was elected secretary of the union, but Silvis Silvis understood that to truly have power, the iron molders would need to organize beyond Philadelphia. And so in 1859, 12 molders from various unions met in Philadelphia to plan to join together. The Civil War put those plans on hold. During the war, as men went to fight, many workers saw their wages increase due to the labor shortage. But prices at the stores rose even more quickly, and it became harder and harder to make ends meet. Recognizing the need for labor to organize, in 1863, Silvis helped found the Iron Molders International Union. He became the first president of the new union. 21 locals joined under the Iron Molders International Union, and it grew to include 8,000 workers. But Silvis had a bigger vision for the labor movement. He thought all skilled trades should band together to improve wages and working conditions. So in 1866, he founded the National Labor Union. The National Labor Union quickly grew to 30,000 workers. But Silvis died in 1869, cutting short his efforts to grow a national union. The union continued until 1873, when it dissolved. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 71 degrees Fahrenheit. We continue with our excessive heat warning, which will continue throughout the week and into the weekend. Fair conditions currently, and they're forecasting temperatures to be a bit cooler than the 111 that we had yesterday. Partly cloudy skies, and we will still have near record temperatures. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid to upper 60s. It really didn't cool off in the house overnight since the temperatures didn't get below 70, unfortunately. Hopefully it will be much cooler. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then sunny tomorrow with near record high temperatures. Highs near 110, which means it will be hotter here at the mothership. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have been updated, and we now stand at 481,020 infections. The deceased, I don't know if that's been updated or if it's just, regardless, remains the same at 559. Grass pollen is rated moderate here in Rogue River itself. The air quality index for the region is good, at the upper end of good, by the way, at 49 parts per million. Will be in moderate in one tick. And the daytime UV index is very high at level 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 68%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 77 and sunny. Rome is 90 degrees and partly cloudy with a heat advisory. Kyiv is 76 degrees with heavy rain showers. Kabul is 76 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 82 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 50 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and cloudy with an air advisory from smoke from the oak fire blowing in. And New York, is 81 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Jill Lawless of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has defended meeting a Russian oligarch with a KGB past, saying, "As far as I am aware, no government business was discussed at the 2018 get-together," which means I think business was discussed. Johnson, who quit as Conservative Party leader on July 7th after months of ethics scandals, is facing questions about his relationship with Russian-born newspaper owner Yevgeny Lebedev and his father Alexander. The older man is a businessman and former Cold War-era KGB officer who has been sanctioned by Canada for his role in enabling Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In April of 2018, Johnson went to a party at Yevgeny Lebedev's Italian mansion that was also attended by Alexander Lebedev. Johnson, who was British Foreign Secretary at the time, was not accompanied by any officials or staff. The event was held as Johnson returned from a NATO meeting and weeks after former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were poisoned with the nerve agent Novichok in the English city of Salisbury. A police officer and 2 local people were also sickened, one of whom, Don Sturgis, later died. Britain blames Russia's GRU security service for the Salisbury attack, a charge Moscow denies.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mari Yamaguchi of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The leaders of Japan and Indonesia agreed today to bolster their ties in maritime security and their cooperation on climate change, energy, and investment between the Asian archipelago nations. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at a joint news conference after holding talks with Indonesian President Joko Widodo in Tokyo said Japan will provide support to further reinforce Indonesian maritime security capability to ensure peace and safety at sea in the Indo-Pacific region. Kishida also announced that Tokyo is loaning $318 million U.S. to fund Indonesian infrastructure projects and disaster prevention. Widodo's Japan visit follows his trip to China, where he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping and formally invited him to the Group of 20 summit in Bali in the fall. The two leaders on Tuesday also discussed issues ranging from trade to maritime cooperation. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.